Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a realm where reality intertwines with the inexplicable, where the boundaries of reason dissolve into the shadows of uncertainty. Welcome to the political twilight zone. I am your guide through this enigmatic labyrinth, where politics and power take on life of their own. In this dimension, the threads of truth weave a tapestry of intrigue, challenging our perception of the world we thought we knew. In this world, nothing is as it seems, and the truth lies buried beneath layers of deceit. Prepare to venture where reason meets the unexplained, and where the unexplained might just be.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around, joining me here for another week. Rick Wagner getting it right here on Kansas City, KGLN, the internet, and a few other places. We do appreciate your listenership, as always. So, kind of a busy week. I mean, we have this, is it a summit that took place on Friday between Putin and Trump? I don't know if you call it that. It was certainly interesting. I think it's the first time, it's the first time that an American president and someone from Russia at that level have met in Alaska. I was trying to think back of when we bought Alaska, if we didn't meet anybody up there, but probably not. Anyway, so it's been quite a week. Let's talk about some other stuff first. I'd like to bring something local here to our listeners that are listening in the western Colorado region, and that is an interesting project is over in Utah that I think bodes well for this part of the nation. It's called the Lisbon Valley Uranium Project, and it's they got jobs and investments done in the Four Corners region. They're reviving some uranium mining project. It's just across the Utah border, I think, in the Four Corners down there. Hopefully, it's going to bring a bunch of good jobs, new infrastructure, some tax revenue. And people in the area, in that area down there, I mean, there's not a lot of high-paying jobs in industry down there. So they've been saying that get us some jobs down here, need high-paying jobs that don't vanish when the tourist season ends. And, this could be one of them for them. So, I mean, here's the question. Are we ready to capture the supply chain work from this, or would just out-of-state contractors scoop it all up? We don't know. But at the very least, that part of the country down in Utah is going to get some jobs, it looks like. And we may see some other uranium-type operations pop up because people are interested in what? Nuclear power again. Now, some of you that have been around a long time, or their parents, grandparents, whomever, will recall that in the 60s in western Colorado and eastern Utah, there was sort of a uranium rush. A lot of people had uranium mines because there was thought to be a growing demand for uranium. And we had a mill here in western Colorado. There was a lot of yellowcake that we still had to get rid of at some point, by the way. And so it was quite the operation. And it seemed to just be a good idea, although I don't think they understood that it was quite as good an idea about radon to make sidewalks and whatnot out of the mill tailings. Although, not to be too hysterical, radon really only is a problem if it's in an enclosed environment. It's not going to just drift out of the sidewalks and hover there around you. But anyway, this could be something pretty good for Colorado, eastern Utah, because we do have a lot of uranium out here. We have natural uranium deposits. And so if this keeps going, who knows? We might get a couple more of these mills out here, and it would be a good thing. And it's also a good thing to look back to nuclear power. I mean, it's as safe as anything. I mean, we've had these Fukushima, the Chernobyl things, 3 Mile Island, which wasn't as big a deal as we seem to think it was back then, as it was now. But it's nevertheless, we have a need for this kind of thing. We're not going to be able to meet our power generation needs in, say, 20 or 30 years in an efficient way, even with liquefied natural gas and other type of ways of generating energy, which, by the way, we should be doing right now, because we can certainly build a natural gas plant to generate electricity a lot faster than we can a reactor. And here's an idea. Let's stop closing down the ones we have. Here in Colorado, we have a company called Excel, and it's in various states, and it's terrible. I don't understand what they think their job is. Apparently, they think their job is to get rid of as much energy as possible, and what remains, to charge you as much as possible for it. Now, here in Colorado, part of that's at the urging of our Public Utilities Commission and, of course, our lunatic legislature that are not only lunatics, but a lot of them aren't really, they're not smart at all, really. And so this is what happens, is we have our rates going up and our supply going down, even though we have the ability to create more plants. And we're shutting some of them down in the area. So that's got to stop. I don't know how we're going to stop it. We have to get some people who have some sort of brain attached to their body in our legislature and a couple other places. Stop the PUC from being a political body like it is and back to its old job of just making sure that electrical rates are reasonable, because that's went by the wayside. Speaking of federal takeovers, some of you out there I know are interested in this federal takeover of the D.C. My, there's some people that are upset about it. Apparently, some people are funding protests. Is that pretty interesting? Yeah, I think it kind of is. Is that it's kind of crazy that people, not only out of town there, but in some ways almost out of the country, are flowing money to protesters to go protest a crackdown on crime in D.C. If you stop and think about that, would that make any sense as a sentence if you'd said it a few years ago? People are protesting a crackdown on violent crime in a city that is just terrible, more dangerous than Baghdad, Bogota, Lima, Peru, Mexico City. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see the numbers on Mogadishu, but it's probably right in there. Who would have thought that you would hear that kind of sentence when you talked about crime just a few years ago? And where would you get the Democrat politicians? Because, okay, they're not very smart about some of this stuff. They're cagey, but to get out in front of this and essentially say, oh, no, we don't want it. The crime is, we should stop doing this. Crime should just let it go. It's not as bad as you think. I mean, that's pretty, I think, harmful in a political sense, because outside of D.C., where people, for some reason, don't have a good grasp on reality, the rest of the country thinks this is not the right position to take. Crime needs to stop as much as possible. Are we going to stop all of it? Of course not. And, we don't want to have a kind of society where we completely eliminate crime, because in order to do that, you have a society that is completely under the control of some sort of governmental unit, right? You have to have that balance between personal freedom and oversight. It's not an easy one to strike, I'll give you that. But we certainly can do a lot better job than we are now. And the fact that President Trump would like to see D.C. be a city where you can walk around safely in the afternoon. I mean, it's getting where you have a problem walking around during the day in some of the areas in the district. And just don't listen to these knuckleheads that are now coming out. I'm like Schumer. I go and walk all the time. Oh, no, you don't. You don't walk around in the main parts of the district. Come on. It's what it is, and it's just another reflection of some of these big cities around the country that are run by Democrats with these policies. I mean, New York's going to probably elect this Zoran the commie. I hate to use the word commie. It seems kind of backward. It's just the Zoran the dictatorial socialist. That might be better. And it's funny how people from Chicago, who have maybe the dumbest and worst mayor in America, certainly the largest city in America, and man, that is a contest that is hard to win, have been saying to New York, say, look, don't do what we did here. They replaced Lori Lightfoot, who is terrible, with someone who is even worse. A complete disaster. I'm not sure what sort of adjective you use after Lori Lightfoot. I thought she was a complete disaster. The ability to burrow down deep, to hit the bottom of the barrel and then start chipping away to get out of the bottom of the barrel, to start digging down. I didn't think that was possible, but they in fact have managed to do that. Something has to be done. And remember, D.C. is a little bit different, because people are saying, well, what if they try and take over all these other cities? Sort of as a good question, if you kind of believe in federalism. Well, D.C. is a completely different animal. It's a federal city. It's always been a federal city. The framers and those that came after them never wanted the District of Columbia to be its own city, much less a state. It was supposed to be run for the benefit of the federal government. That's why everybody gave up that swamp so they could put some buildings on it and it was supposed to stay out of reach. It's very different than a regular state city. Okay, we're back. We're going to keep looking at a few of the stories this week. I mean, this Alaska summit, I guess, like I said, it might be a summit. These very severe consequences that could happen if Putin doesn't go along with things. Here's the thing that's a problem about this, and obviously we kind of know what happened there and whatever did happen there. We have a problem with sanctioning Russia any more than we already have. We've got a lot of sanctions in on Russia, and they've only had a moderate impact on them. Let's just say moderate, and that's giving them a bit. Here's the thing, is that one of the big ones, the big one that they would try and trot out here, is that the United States would say, we're not going to trade with anybody that trades with Russia, as a way to cut off all of Russia's trading partners. Because what they've done is they've just switched some trading partners that from the ones that stopped trading with them. There are still people that want inexpensive natural gas, oil products, things like that. I mean, the nickel, the kinds of things that the Soviet Union has. By the way, if you want to have a really depressing look at life in Russia, I keep saying Soviet Union, it's all the same, really. Take a look at what they're doing in some of their nickel mines. The people that are mining the nickel in Russia are living to be, almost 50 years old, some of them. So it's not pretty. It's one of the ways you keep your costs down, the same way that China does. So people are happy in other places to buy their products, even if the traditional trading partners are not. So you threaten them and say, look, we're the biggest trading partner with pretty much everybody. So if you don't stop buying things from Russia, then we're going to stop buying things from you. Well, that's pretty serious. It would be very serious. It'd also be very serious for us. That's the problem with that. There are a lot of things we get from some of these countries that maybe we could do without, but we sure don't want to pay the prices that would shoot up if we did that. Now, if we need to do it and people are convinced that that's worth it, then that's one thing. But they got to know that it's not going to just sanction Russia. When you do things like this, you don't just sanction one side of the equation. There's some balancing that goes on there. So when we decide to not trade with people that are trading with Russia, we're going to be cutting out India, who's getting a lot of cheap energy from them, and China, who we already have enough problems with trading with them. And then where will that leave us? It's going to hit a real spike into the economy. And the economy is doing better now, certainly better than when Sleepy Joe was running it. But, it's still got some fractures in it that we're trying to heal. One of those is the federal rate cut that we keep waiting for, right? See what the Fed's going to do with cutting the interest rate. The stock markets will always surge on expectations the Fed will cut rates, and hopefully they're going to cut them in September. It's the market's trying to figure that out. Is that going to happen? I think that about 70% of the people think that they're going to get at least a quarter point cut in the interest rate in September. So that might be helpful. It would certainly help small businesses, people trying to buy houses, and also, we get a little bit cheaper oil from things like that. But is it going to help enough? We don't know. And is it going to hit places in the more rural parts, like, say, rural Colorado or Utah or places like that? And will we really see much of that? Probably some. Probably what we'll see is a little bit of a bump in the downward flow of interest rates on homes, cars, credit cards. See, this is what happens is lots of times people talk about interest rate and the Fed, and we just kind of focus in on mortgage rates or a couple things like that, or what we're paying in interest on our national debt, which is really a big deal. But we forget that interest rate at the Fed is tied to a bunch of things that we pay on. And most of your credit cards, if you're making payments on them and not paying them off every month, which some people, that happens to be the way they have to do it, that rate fluctuates based on the height of the Federal Reserve. And it's in your agreement. If you look at your credit card agreement, it will say in there how many points above the Fed rate that your interest will be. So that Fed rate sets the foundation for the interest rate you're paying on your credit cards. So when it goes down, it can help you. Same thing with car loans. They're certainly not stretched out over as long as a mortgage, but they're pretty interest rate sensitive. And two things have happened with car loans anymore is the price of vehicles in general, because the price of labor and materials have went up so much. The average price of a vehicle is something that 10 years ago you would have thought would have been a luxury car. Now it's just the median price. And because of that, people who want newer vehicles are getting into extremely long loans. I remember when I thought a 5-year loan was a really long loan on a vehicle. Well, they're getting longer now. And you really have to be careful if you take out one of these loans to really read it carefully and see how the money is being applied as you put it in there. And if is there an early payoff penalty in there that says, oh, well, if you pay it off early, like, if Aunt Bertha decides to give you some money to get you out of debt, is there a penalty payment in there? I mean, there's a lot of little things that'll get in these contracts. And a lot of places that are in the business of loaning money, and here's the thing, a lot of places that are in the business of loaning money don't necessarily seem like banks or lending institutions. Places like furniture stores, a number of car lots, not all of them, of course. The sort of the buy here, pay here thing. Usually have a deal with some sort of financing company. And usually they're financing people that have a hard time getting credit. So they're paying a really high interest rate anyway. And then when you stick that in with a extremely long period to pay the loan back, what happens? Well, you don't get hardly anything working on your principal. And when it comes time to sell your car, or like I see in our practice here with auto accidents and so forth, if your car gets totaled, the amount that your loan might be very often is more than what your vehicle's worth. And most of the time, unless you have what's called gap insurance that tries to fill that gap, so you could ask your agent about getting gap insurance, because I think many times if you have an expensive vehicle, you should do that. Anyway, if you don't have that, then they're just going to pay you what the market value of your vehicle is at the time of the total loss. Well, if your loan is more than that, that's not their problem. If you have to bring money to the table to pay that car that's wrecked off, that's not their problem. Everybody would like to be able to have some kind of equity in what we own, that it's worth a little bit more than we owe on it. Certainly housing. It'd be nice to do that with cars. It used to be that you could get equity in vehicles, even though they were depreciating, in a couple years, so that now you owed less than they were worth, right? Now that ability to owe less than they're worth is getting further and further along the horizon, and people don't stop to think about that. If you're financing something for an extremely long period of time at a high interest rate, and you're buying a vehicle, and various vehicles have different rates of depreciation. Actually, luxury vehicles, really nice cars, as we think of them, have a tendency to drop fast first, right? Like Cadillacs or Escalades, although they hold their value pretty well. But Mercedes, Porsches, things like that tend to take a pretty good hit the first couple, 3 years. Then they tend to stabilize based on condition. But you can really find yourself in a difficult situation if you get an auto wreck and you've had a higher interest rate over a long period of time, and you realize that not only do you not have a car, but you're going to have to take the money you get from the insurance company for the value of the vehicle, and you're going to have to come up with some more money just to get rid of the loan, much less go out and buy another vehicle. And the other thing to be careful of on this, and I know we're getting off some of our topics here, but this is something is be careful if when you trade a car in, if you owe money on it, and if you're upside down in that vehicle. In other words, if what you owe is just what we're talking about, more than the vehicle's worth, and the financing company offers to roll that into the next purchase. So in other words, they're loaning you more money than the vehicle you're buying is worth, probably substantially more now that you're going to owe. It's not like it goes away, and it raises the amount that you have to pay back. And what they'll do is they'll roll it in and then offer a fairly long period of paying it back. And so many people out there just decide, well, how much is it a month? Well, if you want to think that way, I mean, that's okay. It's not a great way to think. The real problem comes when the money comes due. And it comes due at auto accidents most of the time.
something like that, where all of a sudden you get paid the value of the car versus what you financed the vehicle for. And it's really difficult to watch people struggle with that, because some of them end up not having a car for a period of time because they've had to pay back their loan. Now they have no down payment or anything like that to get another car. And so I guess it's bicycling around town. It's not something that you want to get yourself into. So getting off topic here a little bit, we're talking about the Fed and rates and so forth. Just be aware there are ways to leverage that seem like they help you, but they don't. They actually trap you in something. Now, some people absolutely have to have a vehicle, and they go in with their eyes wide open and say, this is a bad deal, but it's the only deal I can get. Well, that's something you have to decide. But at least be very careful about how much you're borrowing, how long you borrow, when that depreciation rate is going to hit a right spot, where maybe now you own something that's worth more than you owe.
Okay, folks, we're coming around the bend here to the third segment, and I hope I didn't go off too long about this financing thing that's going on. It's just that I see too many very unfortunate stories from really good people who just got taken in by something that was sort of a sleight of hand at the time it happened. People who were not giving them something that were in their best interest. Remember, in today's world, the only person you can be sure that has your best interest at heart is probably you. So that gives you a measure of responsibility to make sure that you're checking that out, because very few people are going to have anything close to caring about your personal finances or anything like that as much as you should. Well, let's see. I had a couple other notes here I wanted to get to, one of which is Canada, because that has a lot to do with our economy, and I was looking at this new prime minister, and it has something to do with all of us in the West out here, because we get a lot of products from Canada that we either use here or are competitive with products that we produce, things like that. Now, this new prime minister that took the place of Justin Trudeau, who apparently is romancing Katy Perry, yes, that's right. For those of you that don't know who Katy Perry is, good. The fact that I have an osmosis effect of understanding who celebrities and things like that are from reading too many newspapers, where they just stick that in with everything else, like the Stalingrad is no, that's not a good one. Something's happening in Zelensky is taking a huge step. Oh, Kim Kardashian wore a bodysuit today. I mean, it's all the same, right? But Katy Perry, singer, just broke up with another person, Orlando Bloom, and so now Justin Trudeau, once again, showing us that he's one of the shallowest people alive. After he left the prime minister's job, he's apparently been hanging out with her. But so they have no new prime minister, and one that they didn't really, I think, want or expect, but they just got, this Mark Carney. He's a former central banker guy. It would be like someone from our Fed, their central bank up there, who took Trudeau's job. And he's talking about some changes in energy and trade policies. That will affect all of us down here. Canada's a major U.S. partner for like energy, agricultural products, and Carney is kind of some of these are pragmatist, but he's also kind of firm, as we might say, in these kinds of things. So we will see. What you could say is wheat, beef, natural gas, stuff like that. A lot of it from this part of the country flows north, as well as a lot of things, as we know, oil and a few things like that, and lumber flowing from Canada. So how that affects your local economy, it could be important. It doesn't seem like it right away. You think, what does this nut job in Ottawa have to do with anything here in western Colorado, eastern Utah, Wyoming, or wherever you listen to this? Well, it's because the goods and services, the goods anyway, materials, raw materials usually, that we're trading with Canada have an effect on the prices you get for those same materials here in the United States. So you got to keep an eye on that. And there's actually some industries that are getting pretty hurt by this tension that's arisen between Canada and the United States. One of them, some of you may have read about this, is alcohol. I don't mean rubbing alcohol. I mean drinking alcohol. whiskey, stuff like that. And Canadians, because they're mad at us, because they think Trump is being mean to them, and we're talking about Canadians really in the eastern part of what think of as Canada. These provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan are much more like the American West. And I don't mean the West Coast. I mean like the real West in terms of their attitudes, how they make their money with ranching and lumber and all these other kinds of things, oil. And there's a lot of people up there talking about, gee, we'd like to be part of the United States. I'm not sure that's going to happen. It would require a pretty interesting exchange. I'm trying to think of a time when that's ever happened, sort of invading something. But anyway, so what you're really talking about in Canada about this attitude is the eastern part of Canada, which is the more populous side of it. I remember Canada isn't exactly a hugely populated area, but they still buy a lot of American goods. And one of the goods they buy, interestingly enough, is alcohol. And we also buy a fair amount of their alcohol. During Prohibition, we bought a lot of their alcohol that we weren't supposed to be having at all and brought it down here. Some people made a whole lot of money off that. Many of you can remember from your studies of history who did that. Anyway, so we're trying to figure out how this is going to affect us. But the alcohol thing is very interesting. Our sales of alcohol in the United States are way down anyway. Gen Z and people in that age range are not drinking very much. And there's a lot of reasons for that people have. Maybe they're health conscious, maybe they're this or that. One of the reasons is it's expensive. If you go out to a bar, I suppose, and order just a beer or a mixed drinks, for God's sakes, you're spending some real dough. Gen Zers, for the most part, don't have a lot of real dough. And that factors into that equation. So it was already bad for the industry in the United States, and now the Canadians are saying, well, we're not going to buy anything of your stuff because we don't like you. Fine, except that it does hurt a lot of American products here that are made with alcohol. But the whole alcohol thing with Gen Z and people like that is just the tip of the iceberg with some of these folks. The milestones in people's lives, I'm not saying buying alcohol is a milestone per se, but what we think of as sort of milestones in life, like getting out of school, getting a job, perhaps getting married, having a child, buying a home, having bought a car, those kinds of things that you used to just see as sort of a blueprint are just not happening with Gen Zs and people right around them. I want to say in about the 1980s, maybe early 80s, probably about 50% of the people in that kind of age range then were getting jobs, getting married, having kids, doing all those milestones in kind of your progression through childhood to adulthood. Now, when you look at the figures, less than 25% of the people in that age range are doing any of those things. A lot of them are living at home, as we know. And they're not just living at home trying to save money, is they don't know what to do. The price of housing has gone up so much, they've just decided that that's off the table. They don't think they're ever going to own a home, and if they do, they don't think it'll make any money if they do own it. They're not completely wrong in that, but we're going to have some kind of adjustment in the real estate market here, period. But because they're just able to sort of slide by, and this is sort of a Carter thing, President Carter thing. Some of you remember that one of his ideas was essentially lower your expectations. Not something Americans really wanted to hear. Well, apparently it resonates a little more with some of these guys because they see it's such an uphill battle now, given prices and the fact that so many of them have student loans, big student loans, that they have used to get degrees that nobody cares about and will not hire them with any kind of enthusiasm to give them enough money to really pay those loans back at any kind of rapid rate. So they're trapped in that. Now, we know that old Joe would decide he's just going to try and forgive those loans. Well, he just can't do that. There's too much effect on the economy. It's like if I said, cars are pretty expensive. I'm just going to tell the government that
we're not going to, people don't have to pay their car loans back anymore. Now, that may sound good, but a lot of people who thought it sounded good would end up out of work real fast because all that money would just dry up. Look what happened during the pandemic, if we want to call it that, when they froze rents on housing. Or, in some instances, they did not allow you to evict renters during this time, even if they weren't paying their rent. Now, who's carrying that burden? Do you think the banks that were financing the purchases on these houses and apartments for the owners are just letting them slide? Not very often. So you're just piling that on the back of yet another middleman. And this is a problem with a lot of the Democrat policies on the left, is that everything they want to do doesn't actually improve the general economy in any way. I mean, arguably, it shrinks it for the most part. But let's say it just kept it the same. It transfers the bulk of some of this spending or money for certain types of programs. It transfers more and more of it to people in the middle class and, of course, the billionaires. I don't know how many times you can say this, but the billionaires have a tremendous amount of money. And there's probably been few times in our history that we've had quite a number of people, this kind of percentage of people that have the kind of money that they have. But that's nothing compared to running a country. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but we've talked about it before. If you seized all of the money from all the billionaires, just took it, you can't even run the country for more than about 7 or 8 months. Not even that long. Just some idea how much it costs. So that's not the answer. The real money, anybody that follows this, comes from the middle class. Most people who are working and paying taxes is where that money comes from, because there's a lot more of them. And they're paying payroll taxes, and they're paying FICA, and they're paying all these things. They're keeping that system afloat. And there's no way that you can do some of the things that these characters are talking about by taxing the rich. It won't pay for it. And it will just make the rich less rich and us really pretty much unchanged. There's a quote that's attributed to Lincoln, and I've never checked to see if it actually is a quote from Lincoln. It's a good quote, which is that you don't strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. That's a lot of the Democrat philosophy, is not really helping someone, but taking something from someone else and maybe giving it to them in the short term, but it really delivers very little help. And it begins to destroy the whole class of people that you're taking money from. And when you begin to take enough money, then pretty soon they just say, the heck with it. We're not going to work any harder than we have to because it doesn't go in our pocket. These are easy, fundamental, 7th grade kind of things about economics that apparently are extremely elusive to people in state and national legislatures. It doesn't seem to make any sense to them. There's always money. I mean, the printing presses are still going, or we're still able to tax people. Economies have a certain natural resiliency and methodology that they use as they move forward. You folks out there have that feeling that there is a pace to it, that in a capitalist economy, and let's face it, we're not a pure capitalist economy, but we have mostly capitalist ideas, or a tremendous amount of them. We have a lot of socialist ideas now. Yeah, I mean, thanks to our government over the last 40 years, we have a lot of them that, if you went back to 1913, when they did income tax, people would have thought would never happen. And it's been going on so long now that we don't even think about it. But at any rate, these kinds of things, the transactional nature of economics, particularly capitalism, is not hard to figure out. You see it every day. You have a product that people want. It's an improved product, or sometimes it's just a meme product, right? Something that everybody wants, a certain kind of product, a certain brand of something or whatever. It may not have any more utility or actual use, but people want it because it has perceived value, whatever. Then competition kicks in. People who have this thing, and now everyone wants it, want to sell it for the most amount they possibly can. So they raise the price. Well, eventually competitors say, I could take less profit in this thing and sell it, more of it, than the people are taking a lot of profit. And you begin to get some rebalancing because of that capitalistic impulse in the economy. When you try and let the government set the 5-year plans about where you're supposed to be and how much you're going to spend here and there, all of that natural resiliency, the muscle memory of the economy, it disappears. And you just end up with these terrible situations that we see again and again in countries that have had planned economies. It's funny because the word planned economy seems like, oh, that's good. It's good to have a plan. Well, your plan ought to be to have a system in place that lets people be as free as possible to trade and create. Obviously, there's guardrails a little bit on this thing, but you want to make them as few as possible. A planned economy is the other end of that spectrum. It's the idea that you're supposed to somehow be able to take into account a myriad amount of economic forces and direct them in a certain way and get a certain result. Has that ever worked? No, it's never worked. It's never worked anywhere. The fact that people keep trying it is a combination of a couple of things. One, people don't know history at all anymore, so they have no idea that this idea they think they just came up with has been tried, 100 times over the last 5,000 years. They don't know. And even if they do, because we have this natural hubris amongst people, and remember the Dunning-Kruger effect we talk about, where dumb people think they're smarter than they are, it really influences this kind of thing, is they look at that and they say, well, yeah, those guys in 1965, when they had the, sort of that big push into socialism under LBJ and so forth, yeah, that was, that was mishandled. I mean, we know how to do it better. We know better than the Great Society and things like that. No, you don't. It's you're still working with bad tools. If you're using the wrong tools on something, it's never going to turn out right. And the tools for a planned economy are not tools that build an effective economy. So they're never going to turn out right. Why people can't see this, I don't know. I have some theories. Some of them have to do with the Dunning-Kruger effect. Some of them have to do with there's personal issues at stake where people sometimes just don't care. Or their personal aggrandizement at the expense of everybody else is more important than raising everybody on the harbor's boat, right? Here's something that I think brings this kind of weird approach to things to the fore. Some of you may have heard about this. Right now there's a debate in France, and it's leaking into the United States, although thankfully with the Trump administration not as fast. And it's really helping some of the conservative parties in France and actually in Great Britain too, the Reform Party. And it's turned out that air conditioning, right? Now, I remember this during the Olympics in Paris, that they were cutting back on the air conditioning because of the environment. Yes, indeed, the environment. Yeah, it's a terrible environment without air conditioning. Everybody knew that when they didn't have it, and it was an improvement. Anyway, the French left, for instance, are calling air conditioning an environmental aberration. Some have even said air conditioning is a far-right thing. I know. That would have surprised to hear that a couple of years ago. Now it's like, of course, it's what people are going to say. But when you label something as ordinary as wanting to be cool in a house as a far-right problem, you end up in the same place as those who call protecting borders or questioning asylum housing as far-right. And mainstream views held by millions of folks out there. It's not a fringe ideology that I'd like to have my house cooler than if it didn't have air conditioning, because I've discovered when it's cooler, I function better. And the more political elites and media people try and misuse the label of that's a far-right thing, and then they're trying to attach it to everything. Exercise, fitness, desire to be in shape, resistance to the president's revival of the presidential fitness push. all of that is part of this weird thing where that's far right. I mean, and if you dig around a little bit, it's the same thing that's happening with the idea that the feds are trying to straighten the crime problem out in D.C. For some reason, anything that attempts to fix a problem that involves, I don't know, freedom or enforcing the law so that people have freedom, because that's what you're trying to do. Is you're not just trying to oppress somebody with this kind of thing. What you want is to be able to open the streets up so people can go out and do something and not get mugged, right? So you're trying to improve freedom if you do this right by focusing on enforcing the law. But you have places like these nut jobs in France and a little bit over here, which is coming more and more actually, with the idea that air conditioning and things like this is a far right thing. Working out at the gym is a far right thing. I mean, every time I say it, it just sounds weird. But one thing about that is every time they try and label something that way, it loses more meaning. It's the same thing with National Socialism. Everything's National Socialism now. Even though people who are saying it have absolutely no idea what happened anywhere in 1940, for instance, or 1935 or 39. They don't have the clue as to what was going on then. It's just a buzzword for them. And so what it does is it strips it of its meaning. And when you take something as bad as National Socialism and some of the things that happen with it and just throw it at everything, you just demean it. You just cheapen it. And it loses its real meaning. And that's not a good thing. And eventually, we've seen this now, is the worm turns. Is people get so tired of these labels being thrown at people, and they begin to think they're unfair. And they begin to turn to the politicians that they're being thrown at and support them. We saw this with President Trump and some others. So what happens when you get these extremists out there that keep seeing that this isn't effective? Well, you get more and more. They can't stop. If they're unable to say, oh, we better dial back this thing about National Socialism because it's just blowing up in our face. It makes people now kind of be defensive of the people we're throwing it at, particularly when it seems so absurd. The Sydney Sweeney jeans ads that we hear nothing about but craziness. When you get to that point, people instinctively want to say, hey, look, I'm not a big, I necessarily wear American Eagle jeans, or I guess I might like some of Sydney Sweeney's movies. She was good in The White Lotus, by the way. I did see that first season of that. But is that, just stop it and stop calling her dog, a German Shepherd, a Nazi dog. When you do that, you're just ruining it for everybody. You're losing the term, and you're making it seem trite. And it's not trite.
Hi, folks. Thanks for listening. Listen, if you'd like to listen to more and you want to maybe perhaps have someone else listen to our podcast, you can do so either by going right to our webpage, politicalviking.com, or therickwagnershow.com. Both of them take you there. You can get links right directly to our podcast, or you can hear our podcast on Podbean, on iTunes, and Spotify, and a couple others. So you can find us. We appreciate it if you do. And if you've heard the show, you want somebody else to hear it, that's a good way to send it to them. Thanks for listening.